Okay, welcome back, biology. This is chapter 27, section 4, and we're going to be investigating and looking into the mollusks. And the mollusks, as you can see down here, some of them you'll be really familiar with, such as the snail and slug, or the octopus and squid, but some you're not going to be familiar with, and these are included in the mollusks. This right here is a nudibranch, and you're going to learn about different mollusks that you may not be familiar with. I'm going to try to do the videos now by section. I think that's going to help organize both our YouTube channel and Myolu and such, and just make it easier for you to find particular topics and such. So we'll do this by section from now on. As well, from now on, I'll have a slide in the beginning that sort of lays out the important vocabulary for this particular section. And so you can, I'm just going to flash it up in videos that we have coming up, and you can pause it and write down these different vocabulary terms. You then, during the video, when you're taking notes, can write down the definitions of these terms. You can also go back to the book and look at diagrams and such from these definitions as well. So that's a slide that I'll include from now on. As well, I'll also include this slide, a key concept slide. And this is going to just lay out for this particular section, or whatever section we're on, just important questions to be paying attention to as we go through. And so any slide that has this little key at the top, that means that it's going to be answering one of these questions. So I suggest that you pause this slide every time we have a video, you write down the questions, and then anytime you see the key, you write down the answer for the particular question. So the mollusks. The mollusks are soft-bodied animals. They're invertebrates. They do not have a skeleton. Instead, they have an external shell or an internal shell. And so they're not vertebrates. They do not have a vertebral column or backbone. They have an external shell or an internal shell. External shell you're familiar with, like in the snails. Snail has an external shell, or like a clam. Clam has an external shell. But then internal shells you may not be familiar with. This is in a squid. Squid has a pin, and we'll see this in our dissection. When we do a dissection of the squid, you'll see the pin. You actually be able to write with the pin. We'll dip it in ink. The squid has ink as well in it, and you can dip it in there and write your name out. So we'll get to that next class. You may be wondering, well, this is still chapter 27, and the beginning 3 sections of chapter 27 we learned about roundworms, flatworms, segmented worms, and the annelids. And so why are mollusks, the snails, the octopus, why are they in this chapter? Well, they're related. And there's many different reasons why we know they're related evolutionarily, but one of the major reasons is because this structure right here is known as a trochophore larvae, and it's a free-swimming larvae, and it has different structures. We're not going to get into all the different structures of this larvae. You won't have to memorize any of these structures, but both annelids, the segmented worms, and also some of the mollusks have this same exact larvae, and so we know that they have some sort of evolutionary relationship. So the body plan for the mollusk has 4 different parts, and we'll learn about these, and I'll show you a diagram in the next slide. There's a few different ones. You have the foot, and the foot takes many different forms, and it can serve different purposes. So the foot in like the squid is the tentacles and the arms, but for a clam, the foot sort of aids it in burrowing into the sediments. So foot can serve different purposes. It's a muscular structure. The mantle, on the other hand, is a thin layer, and it covers sort of the mollusk body, much like a cloak. And so then the mantle is going to serve to secrete calcium carbonate, and that makes this shell. So any mollusk that has a shell, internal or external, the mantle is what creates that shell through secretion and calcium carbonate. Then we have the visceral mass, and the visceral mass is going to be just beneath the mantle, and it consists of all the internal organs for the mollusks. And so here we have a diagram. We have the snail, we have a clam, we have a squid, and here's the different color-coded parts according to the diagram. And so we can sort of go through here and match the colors. You can match the colors for each one to see each of the parts. So for the shell, the pin in the squid right here, well, it's now blue because I just marked it, but it was brown, and that's the shell for the squid. It's internal, but the shell for the clam is this external part all the way around it. And then as well for the snail all the way around, that's the shell. The mantle cavity is in blue for each. Right? They're different shapes and different sizes, but that's mantle cavity. The foot is for the snail, this part, for the clam right here, and for the squid, this is the foot. You also have the gills. The gills are for feeding in the clams, so the gills will serve a purpose of feeding and also breathing. But in other organisms like the snail or the squid, it's gonna be for serve a purpose of respiration, exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. And then you have a basic, very simple digestive tract going through each one of these organisms. One thing I want to point out of the squid and clam and some of the other organisms, they'll have this structure right here and here, and this is called the siphon. This is going to bring water in, and this is how it filter feeds and also breathes. And then like for the squid, instead of using it for filter feeding or anything, it's going to bring water into the mantle cavity like this, and then it's going to quickly push this out, push the water out, and it's going to move the squid in this direction. Okay, and that's all through this structure right here called the siphon. Sorry, the mess I'm making right here, but that's called the siphon. And so the squid moves through jet propulsion, and the same with the octopus as well. So anyways, that's just that's an important term, siphon. How do they feed? So they can be many different things. They can be herbivores like the snails. They can be carnivores like a squid. They can be filter feeders like a oyster. And there's even parasitic mollusks as well. One of the ways they feed, like a snail will feed, is through a structure called the radula, which you do need to know. And these are these teeth-like structures that you can see right here, individual teeth-like structures, and they rest on this flat cartilage piece near the opening or the mouth of the snail. And this enables it to scrape off algae from rocks and different surfaces, and then it scrapes it off using these teeth and puts it into its digestive tract right there. So that's called the radula. So now we're going to talk about the different classes of mollusks. And so the first class that we need to talk about is the gastropods, and hopefully you're going to see a little bit of the diversity of the mollusks in this. I'm going to show you a few pictures. The diversity, as we've seen time and time again, is just unbelievable, unreal. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of the diversity, and hopefully you enjoy the photos. We're not going to talk about movement. So gastropods, one of the gastropods is snail, and the snail, there's many different types of snails. They're not just the generic ones you find in your garden, although that's a snail as well. And we're not going to talk about movement because we're going to do a lab activity where I bring in some snails and you're going to investigate how they move. This is the foot of the snail, and this is key in its movement. This is that external shell. It contains the visceral mass where most all of the internal organs are. And then it has a very basic eye structure. We'll talk more about the evolution of the eye or the different ways organisms see. And so this is the eye structure, which just basically detects light, and that's about it. The radula is down here. That's where it feeds. Here's just another pretty picture